Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Free Space News. It's been a hot minute since I've uploaded. I was a little bit busy with school, living student life and stuff, and I just got a bit lazy, honestly. But summer's back. I have a lot more time on my hands now. Hopefully that translates into more videos for you guys. Alright, so today I want to cover something that has been on everyone's mind over the last few days, which has been the abortion laws that were passed in Alabama, as well as some other states. Now, the Washington Post has a great article that goes in depth and asks a lot of the really important questions that people might have about this issue. So I want to go over a few of those really quick. So the first one is, why is everyone now talking about Alabama's new law? Well, the article says, quote, "The bill signed by Alabama Governor Kay Ivey on Wednesday prohibits abortion in almost every circumstance and is considered the most restrictive abortion law in the country. Legislation makes exceptions only for the health of the mother and or fetuses with fatal anomalies that make them unlikely to survive without the womb. Rape and incest are not exceptions to Alabama's ban. The laws in Alabama and Missouri specifically exempt women from being criminally liable," said Catherine Krashel, the executive director of the Solomon Center for Health, Law, and Policy at Yale Law School. "Instead, the law targets doctors, which can be prosecuted for performing an abortion, a felony punishable for up to 99 years imprisonment." So, this law was signed by the governor on Wednesday, and you might think, based on that, well, it's now law in Alabama, right? Well, kind of, but not really. There's still a bit of nuance there. Because this law is so in conflict with the 70s Supreme Court decision of Roe versus Wade that made abortion legal in the U.S. in the first place, this law is going to be challenged legally at the federal level. Plaintiffs representing women in Alabama will likely go to the federal courts and try to claim that this law is in conflict with the Roe v. Wade. And very likely they're going to win a lot of those cases. But what's going to happen is when they win those cases, conservative legal teams are likely going to appeal this all the way up to the Supreme Court. And we have to remember, since Donald Trump has been in office, he's appointed 2 new Supreme Court justices, which now means that the conservatives, and specifically the socially conservative, religious conservatives, have an advantage on the Supreme Court. If this case were to go all the way to the Supreme Court, I think it's very likely that Roe v. Wade could be overturned, which would have a massive impact on abortion laws in the United States. Now, because this specific incident in Alabama could have such a large impact on the broader issue of abortion, I wanted to talk about the issue of abortion in general. And the Washington Post article that I mentioned earlier does ask a few of these questions. So the first question that it asks is, does banning abortion reduce the rates at which abortions happen? And the answer to that question is not really. The article says, quote, "Countries with total or partial bans have an abortion rate of 37 in 1,000 people, while 34 in 1,000 people have abortions in countries with no restrictions on it, according to Guttmacher Institute, a research and policy organization that advocates for abortion rights. Expanding access to contraception, however, does correlate with lower rates of abortion," the Guttmacher Institute says. A study by Washington University in St. Louis found that in 2012 that giving women free birth control reduces abortion rates by 62 to 78% compared to the national rate. Now, this is a little bit ironic given that we're talking about Alabama here, which is a state that generally teaches abstinence-only sexual education, and has, as a result, some of the highest rates of teen pregnancy in the country, some of the highest STD rates, and therefore, because the pregnancy rates are so high for teens, those are people that very likely don't want babies and therefore are likely to want to get abortions. Now, one other question that's important to ask about this specific Alabama law is it popular amongst the people, right? It might seem very outlandish to people not living in Alabama, but if the people support it, then maybe they should go ahead and do it, right? Well, according to a 2018 statewide poll conducted by the Anzalone Listgrove Research on behalf of Planned Parenthood, only 31% of Alabamians, okay, I think it's Alabamans, but I'm not from there, whatever. 31% of Alabamans were in favor of an abortion ban that lacks a rape incest exception. As Vox's Anna North reported, the ban signed into law by Alabama's Governor Kay Ivey on Wednesday does not have an exception for rape or incest. So take that poll with a grain of salt, because again, they weren't asked whether or not they support the Alabama law specifically. They were just asked about what do they support what the bill actually does. And in general, they don't. And that, to me, says a lot that in a very conservative state like Alabama, if only 30% of people support this kind of an abortion ban, it's really not that popular of an idea anywhere in the country. Now, to me, when we talk about the issue of abortion, probably the most important thing to mention is the ethics of it, right? Because for people who do oppose abortion, that's likely why they do so. And to me, the most important thing with the issue of ethics is, does the fetus feel pain when aborted? Are we causing distress that we would normally think is morally wrong? Well, according to CDC data, this tends to not be the case when abortions happen. According to the CDC, the majority of abortions in 2015 took place in early gestation, so early part of the pregnancy. 91.1% of abortions were performed at before 13 weeks gestation. A smaller number of abortions, 7.6%, were performed at 14 to 20 weeks gestation, and even fewer, only 1.3%, were performed at more than 21 weeks gestation. Now, what's important about that timeline? According to Live Science magazine, the science shows that based on gestational age, the fetus is not capable of feeling pain until the third trimester, which only starts at about 27 weeks into the pregnancy. So it seems to be the case that when you really look at when most of these legal abortions are done, they're done, early on when the fetus can't really feel any pain. We're not really causing distress for a new life form that we would normally think is morally wrong. It seems to just be a simple medical procedure. And one could say, well, they don't feel pain, but they might have a soul or something, in which I would argue you don't want to bring religion into something like this. The First Amendment clearly separates church and state with the Establishment Clause, and that's not something that we can really consider when, writing abortion legislation, for example. So at this point in the video, those of you that are pro-choice have probably liked everything I've had to say, and those of you who are pro-life probably haven't liked it as much. But there is one point, but while I do side with the pro-choice people on this, there is one argument they've been making over the past few days, especially on social media, that I absolutely cannot stand. And it absolutely makes the pro-choice movement lose a ton of credibility. And it is this argument: men shouldn't be making laws about women's bodies. If you are a pro-choice person out there, never, ever, ever use that argument again. It is a terrible, terrible argument, and I'm about to tell you why. So first of all, it commits two basic logical fallacies. The first one being poisoning the well. This group, the men that I have identified, are nefarious, are uninformed, whatever adjective you want to give to them, and therefore you shouldn't trust them, and you should only trust women to make this kind of decision. Now, when it comes to the actual decision of whether an individual is deciding to get an abortion, whether or not they should do that, that's completely up to the woman, and men should not have a say over that, right? But when it comes to whether or not this procedure is ethically legal, that's a completely different question that absolutely anyone can have an opinion on. While I might disagree with some of the men who oppose abortion or being legal, they absolutely have the right to an opinion about it, and just because they're males does not mean they shouldn't be making legislation about it. Now, the second logical fallacy it commits is that it's an appeal to authority. It's saying that this other group, women, are the people that we should trust when it comes to this issue, when you've actually given no evidence to show why trusting women on whether or not the procedure should be legal is actually beneficial. Now, you might say, well, women obviously are way more pro-choice than are men, and they might know issues of pregnancy better, simply because they're women. And while that might be true, again, it doesn't prevent men from doing the research themselves and deciding, their opinion on the issue. And the last reason is that this is a terrible argument is that it focuses solely on identity politics, specifically gender, saying that, it's only women that should be able to make this decision and men should just kind of shut up, when really both women and men who are uneducated about gestational periods and about, when the fetus can feel pain and about the science of abortion, people who are uneducated about that maybe shouldn't be making the decisions. It's a medical procedure after all. Shouldn't it be the doctors themselves that are actually deciding, that are influencing the legislation the most? Or in legislation hearings, when we're actually hearing arguments for and against this kind of legislation, we should be listening to the doctors more than anyone else, because they actually know the ethical implications that we all claim to be concerned about. So to kind of summarize this video, I think what I was just saying is more of a lesser point. I've always hated the argument that men should just kind of shut up when it comes to abortion and let women do all the talking and deciding, because men are no less capable of doing the research on the issue and developing their own opinions as women. and we should really just be listening to medical professionals as opposed to any one gender over the other. But on the issue more broadly, the Alabama law to me seems, yeah, I'll just come out and say it, absolutely insane.
100% but fucking sane.
Not having an exception for rape or incest is absolutely barbaric, and it's really a terrible thing that this law was passed. But what's even more terrible is that this law could end up overturning Roe v. Wade, because if it's challenged and goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, Trump's very conservative Supreme Court would likely try and overturn Roe v. Wade. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded anything, but I will be better about uploading more content this summer, and I really appreciate you guys watching. Again, make sure to subscribe, like the video down below, share it with friends, do anything you can to kind of spread the word about this channel, and I will see you in the next video.